Number 10. Superhenge. Everyone has heard of Stonehenge. But did you know that in 2015, scientists announced the discovery of a massive stone monument 5 times larger than England's iconic landmark? It's being called Superhenge, and researchers with the Stonehenge Hidden Landscape Project said that there are at least 100 giant stone monoliths buried just 2 miles, or 3 kilometers, northeast of Stonehenge. They're also saying that it could have once been a Neolithic settlement occupied by those who built the original Stonehenge monument. During the archaeological dig, researchers uncovered ramps, tools, and even a spade crafted from a cow's shoulder blade. They also discovered holes in the ground where they believed posts had once stood that had been part of a much larger structure. This place was likely constructed 4,500 years ago. However, there is still a lot of mystery here. For example, researchers believe that just before the large Superhenge monument was completed, work stopped, and the ancient pagans suddenly gave up the project. Nobody knows if this was because of a religious or political change, but it appears that the larger construction never did reach its conclusion. The ancient pagans then dismantled much of the project and covered the evidence in dirt. Even today, there is a circumference of about a mile long that can be seen from where Superhenge was buried. Unfortunately, the purpose of this massive undertaking and the mystery of its disassembling are completely unknown. Number 9. Ancient Leopard Pit. In Israel, archaeologists have unearthed a leopard trap that they believe to be 5,000 years old. This happened in the Negev Desert just a few years ago. According to one of the researchers who worked on the discovery, it's an exciting thing to find because nobody had expected the people from 5,000 years ago to be trapping carnivores. The researchers believe this ancient technology would have been used back at a time when humans first domesticated sheep and goats. There have been at least 50 simple traps now discovered throughout the desert in the south of Israel, all of which had been used to capture large cats. There would have been a piece of meat attached to the end of a rope to lure a leopard, and then when the leopard came and took the bait, the rope would have been attached to a stone door, which would have trapped the carnivore inside a box. The traps worked just like any modern animal trap, and this was one of the reasons that researchers first thought the traps were modern. It wasn't until the traps were properly dated that they realized how old they were. Even more interesting is that the traps were dated between 5,000 years old and 1,600 years old, meaning the same technology was used for thousands of years. The traps were probably used to capture leopards, foxes, hyenas, and even wolves, all of which were once prevalent throughout the Middle East. The traps were probably part of a defense system to keep the herds of sheep and goats safe from the hungry predators. Number 8. The Viking Tunnel of Hof. This next discovery is not quite so archaeological. On the outside, the Viking village of Hof, Iceland, looks like a perfectly preserved piece of history. There are huts, a spooky Viking tunnel going underground, and it all looks very legit. However, this is not actually a Viking village. It was a film set created for an Icelandic movie that never ended up being filmed. But it was created so well that the Icelandic government simply let it remain as a tourist attraction. Still, it is an historically accurate reconstruction, and it will definitely make you feel as though you have stepped back in time to when Vikings ruled the small island nation of Iceland. The houses are in excellent condition, with the architecture of the time being represented accurately. You're even able to pry open the doors and spend some time hanging out inside of a relatively legit Viking house. This settlement even has a dungeon located beneath a large artificial boulder. If you want some extra excitement, be sure to go at night when it's extra spooky. Have you ever visited Iceland, or Greenland, or even northern Russia, or Alaska, or Canada? What are your experiences with the far north? Did you encounter any polar bears? Tell me about your stories in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more incredible videos just like this one. Number 7. Ancient Chinese Civilization. In 1929, a peasant in China uncovered a jade artifact while repairing a sewage ditch. This was only the first archaeological find, and the next wasn't made until 1986, when professional archaeologists unearthed 2 pits full of treasure from the Bronze Age in the same location that the original peasant first found the jade artifact. About 100 elephant tusks were found, plus bronze sculptures standing 8 feet tall or 2.5 meters, and all kinds of other amazing relics. The treasures had allegedly been broken and buried as part of a sacrifice, and it has only been recently that archaeologists have determined that the relics came from a long-lost civilization. They were once known as the Sanxingdui, and they lived within a walled city on the muddy banks of the Minjiang River. According to the most recent evidence, archaeologists are now saying that the culture somehow dismantled itself between 3,000 and 2,800 years ago. But the mystery here is that nobody knows why this random ancient culture vanished or where exactly they went. According to Live Science, archaeologists also found the remains of another ancient city in the same area, but it did not contain any of the impressive relics as the first. This has led researchers to speculate that the Sanxingdui people from the original site on the Minjiang River buried all of their valuables and then relocated to a new city. It could have been following an earthquake, a landslide, or even a hostile attack. But the truth is that almost nothing is known about this ancient culture other than that they existed for just a few moments in the grand history of the world. Number 6. Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin is definitely one of the most mysterious archaeological relics on Earth. The Shroud of Turin is actually a linen cloth which bears the image of a crucified man. For some, it is 100% the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. But for others, it's merely a religious artifact that reflects the story of Christ. The truth in this matter is extremely complicated. First of all, the shroud appeared about 600 years ago. Since then, it has remained an important religious symbol for most of the Christians in the world. The earliest historical records of the Shroud of Turin come from 1350, when a French knight presented it to the church as the authentic burial shroud of Jesus Christ. However, there is no record beyond that of how the knight physically acquired the shroud. Another interesting fact is that the Pope back then declared the Shroud of Turin not to be a historic relic. However, the shroud was drawing a lot of pilgrims, and that equaled to a lot of money. This could very well be the reason that the Shroud of Turin was put forth as Jesus' burial garb for the next few centuries. And while the 600 years of history behind the shroud is quite complex, one of the more interesting facts is that in 1418, a woman named Margaret de Charnay sold the shroud in exchange for not one, but 2 castles. And as a punishment, she was excommunicated from the church. To this day, nobody truly knows the origins of this mysterious shroud. Number 5. The Mound of the Dead. Pakistan doesn't get a lot of attention when it comes to amazing archaeological sites, but it is in fact home to many ancient relics and a lot of archaeological interest. One of the more impressive discoveries ever made in Pakistan was the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro, also known as the Mound of the Dead. The discovery was first made in 1922, and subsequent excavations revealed that the mounds of dirt discovered on the right banks of the Indus River contained the remains of what had thousands of years ago been the largest city of the Indus civilization, who had ruled much of modern-day Pakistan from between 2500 and 1700 BC before falling into obscurity. Many digs have been done since 1922 at Mohenjo-Daro. However, the city is still shrouded in mystery. There were many sculptures and reliefs found throughout the ruins, but most of what had comprised the city thousands of years ago had already been destroyed. Most of the evidence suggested that Mohenjo-Daro suffered from multiple floods, likely from the nearby river. This probably caused much of the city to move to nearby Harappa, the second major hub of the Indus people. However, scientists are not completely sure what happened to the obscure civilization, which had consisted of just 2 large cities and a handful of villages. The ruins of Mohenjo-Daro became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1980. Number 4. Gateway of the Sun. The Gateway of the Sun is a mysterious relic located in the South American country of Bolivia. The gateway is carved from a single block of stone and stands about 9 feet tall, or 2.8 meters. The gateway is also carved with at least 48 winged demons, or possibly angels, each wearing feathered headdresses. In the very center of the gateway, right above the opening, is the staff deity, one of the old Incan gods. The gate was originally rediscovered by European explorers in the 19th century, though it was never technically lost, seeing as the locals had always known it was there. The Europeans found it with a huge crack on one side, and many experts believe that the gateway had been moved from its original site, which is what caused the crack. The gateway was crafted by the Tiwanaku people, who had thrived in the area surrounding Lake Titicaca from between 500 and 950 AD. But the big mystery regarding the gate itself is what the inscriptions found on the object are supposed to mean. It's likely that the gate once possessed some kind of astrological significance, and it may even have been used as a type of calendar. There's a design below the central figure that could represent the celestial cycle. However, it's almost impossible to say for sure. The Tiwanaku people were eventually replaced by the Inca civilization, and much of their history and their practices have been lost. Number 3. The London Hammer. The London Hammer is perhaps the most controversial archaeological find ever. That's because the London Hammer was found in Texas back in 1947. And yet, it appears to be 400 million years old. The Ironhead hammer was first found by a couple in Texas while out for a stroll near the small town of London. They apparently found an interesting piece of rock and brought it home. It wasn't for another 10 years until their son broke open the rock on a whim and discovered the hammer trapped inside. It became a local mystery. Then in 1983, the hammer began to attract serious attention. This is because it made absolutely no sense that a modern tool could be found encased in rock dated to be at least 400 million years old. Of course, there are a lot of theories swirling about the London Hammer. Most logical people believe that the hammer was somehow lost in the early 1800s, and then over the next 100 years, a concretion of limestone and minerals encased the hammer in rock, seemingly by magic. This would make a lot of sense, but other theories claim that the hammer somehow traveled through time, while even more lunatic theories claim that the hammer is the ultimate evidence of the creationist theory. The hammer is even exhibited right now in the Creation Evidence Museum of Texas. Number 2. Nonmedal Ruins. The ruins of Nonmedal have fascinated archaeologists for centuries. At its core, Nonmedal is a series of stone structures built over a coral reef inside a lagoon off a remote island in Micronesia. The ruins have been there for at least 1,000 years, since the first people arrived on the island with their canoes. The walls of the artificial island are built of stone, with some of them being 25 feet tall, or 7.5 meters, and 17 feet thick, or 5 meters. There are at least 827,000 tons of stone that were used to create the ancient reef city. Most archaeologists believe that the site served political, ceremonial, and residential purposes. The first people to live on the island were the Saudolor, who arrived probably in the year 1100 AD. However, much of the site is a total mystery. That's because researchers don't know much about its builders. They don't know how so many tons of stones could have been used without levers or pulleys, and even today, the small Micronesian island is only home to 36,000 people. The ruins truly do give off one of the creepiest vibes ever, as if there had once been a civilization that just vanished into thin air. Nonmedal has been referred to as the Venice of the Pacific, and it's also a certified UNESCO World Heritage Site. And while the original ruins were never really lost, as people have been living on the island for over 1,000 years, there are no proper records to indicate the correct history. Some people even believe the island to be a remnant of the lost continent of Mound. Number 1. Mysterious Jade Couple. In a Bronze Age burial site near Lake Baikal in Russia, archaeologists have discovered the strangest couple ever. According to the Siberian Times, expert archaeologists found the remains of an elderly man and his wife, or concubine, buried near the shores of the deepest lake in the world, and they had been buried there for at least 5,000 years. But what makes this ancient couple so interesting is that the man's skeleton had a ring crafted of pure white jade. But he didn't have it on his finger, he had it jammed into his eye socket. There were also 3 more of them on his chest. One of the archaeologists from the digs said that the jade rings were likely connected to an ancient idea about how to make it to the afterlife. Unfortunately, it's hard to know exactly who these people were or what ended their lives. Lake Baikal has been a popular burial site since Neolithic times. And considering 2 skeletons had already been found, archaeologists are confident that there are even more burials in the area. However, nothing more has yet to be found. Which of these archaeological discoveries is the most fascinating? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon for another great video.